2nd of March 2022. I'm Andy Johnson. Good morning. Welcome to the program. Here's what's happening on today's edition of AM Prime. Well, we will tell you a little bit about, in the second hour, Machel Montano, what he's doing, where he is now, as we're probably speaking. We'll get to that sometime down the road. Also, we're talking with the Minister of Youth Development and National Service, Mr. Foster Cummings, on a number of programs they're rolling out for young people in the country. We're talking with him about how that fits into the whole question of national service and youth development in the country. We'll take a look at what's happening in Jamaica and in Antigua as we take you around the region a little bit. Of course, we'll share with you the staples, the numbers for COVID-19 in our midst, where they are as we speak today. We're talking with Lisa McLean-Trotman and Mr. Marlon Bascom on a program organized jointly by the EU and the United Nations. It's an awareness campaign about violence against children. But right now, with us on the program this morning, this is an attempt to bring some, well, I would say, take the tempo down a bit on the reactions to this tragedy that we're talking about in the last couple of days. One of the newspaper headlines this morning says it's a day of grief. 3 more of those divers who went under in that expedition for Paria, their bodies were identified yesterday, but there's a lot of discussion about the matter from one angle or another. And this is an effort by a group of religious leaders to bring some attention to it, to focus it on what it should be. They say there should be no politics and there should be no divisiveness in the discussions about this tragedy. We're talking this morning about that with Reverend Winston Mansing. He is the president of the Faith-Based Network in Trinidad and Tobago, and Imam Imtiaz Ali. We're expecting also to be joined by Pastor Clive Doughton and Pundit Mukram Serju. I'm not sure what has happened there, but Reverend Mansing and Imam Ali are with us. Gentlemen, good morning.
Good morning.
Good to have you. Good to have you. Well, Pastor Mansing, since you were the one who reached out to me first, I'll give you the first go at it. Let's get into why you all felt the need to seek to make this intervention. I think you need to unmute your mic, Reverend. You're speaking, but we're not hearing you.
Sorry, my apologies. Good morning, Mr. Andy. Good morning, Imam, and to the viewers locally and across the world. We are very concerned with faith leaders for this matter and the humanity and the compassion aspect of it. Very, very concerned when we look at what has happened. It's a tragedy. Our nation is once again broken. And as faith leaders, having had some preliminary discussions, one of our concerns is that our nation continues to boil. And we don't want it to reach that tipping point, Mr. Andy, and where it tips over in the wrong direction. I think emotions are beginning to run very high. And we first want to say this morning, we send our condolences on behalf of the entire faith community of Trinidad and Tobago. We send our condolences, our prayer, our churches, mosques, temples have all been in prayer for these families and their loved ones, especially those, and there's one of those families who have lost a number of loved ones in the last month or so. And what is going on is that as we consider the matter, there are a number of questions and concerns that we have and that we would like to see addressed, while we also make a national call for the respect of the dignity of these families. And we ask that from a national perspective, that our politicians and our trade union leaders or union members, etc., and others, or even corporate sector, do not use this situation to capitalize and to create a conversation that takes away from the real issue. The real issue is that there are families that are hurting and something went wrong. And we have some questions and concerns. And what do we do to ensure that this does not reoccur? And that primarily, Mr. Andy, is what our concerns are, what we would like to present at this time as religious leaders of Trinidad and Tobago.
All right, thank you very much, Pastor. We'll get back to you in a moment. Let's go to Pundit Mukram Serju. I'm told we joined also by in fact, Imam Imtiaz Ali, I'm told we're joined by the Pundit and as well as Pastor Clive Doughton. So let's hear from you, Imam. Good morning.
Good morning. Assalamu alaikum. Peace and blessings upon you all and your audience. This morning, as the rest of the country, we are indeed sad with the tragic death of those divers. None of us who are not directly involved could ever feel the pain of these families to lose their loved ones. Of course, in every family, we have always lost people, death and life in the hands of the Almighty. However we go, that's in the hands of the Almighty. But still, we hurt and we cry for the deceased ones and their families. We support their families. And we are hoping that we can support these families of all involved. What we feel is that the matter wasn't really handled in a humane way. And we are hoping that we can persuade the authority to deal with the matters in a little more humane way. So hopefully this could happen.
All right, thank you very much. That's good for an opening statement. Well, I see Pundit Mukram Serju, good morning. Good to have you. Let's get an opening statement from you as to how you see it and what you all are advocating for, how the matter should be handled, what the responses should be and should not be.
Thank you very much, Andy. Good morning, Sitaram. Assalamu alaikum to all the viewers and my fellow guests this morning, Pastor Dutton and Ron Mansingh, Imam Ali. My friends, this morning this country is in such a sad state because of this last tragedy, and there are so many things that have been happening, and too many times we feel that matters are not really being dealt with in a very, should we say, efficient way. There are so many questions in that we have more questions than answers. And right now in this situation, I mean, all of us could think in our own way and have our own comments on what should be done and what should not be done and how things were handled and how they were not handled. And I don't know, there are so many questions that we have to answer. And as Pastor Mansingh mentioned earlier, we all have been praying. The Hindus have just gone through the period of Mahashivratri when all Hindus were outside in their mandirs and special congregations, making offerings and asking for the world to be at peace. We are already fighting with this pandemic, this COVID pandemic. And to add another incident as serious as this one, I mean, something is really amiss. I don't know, we need to have maybe more discussions like you all are having here this morning, we are having here this morning on your station. And so many things, I mean, we cannot really open up and say exactly what our thoughts are because in a country like Trinidad and Tobago, it could be twisted what we are saying. And like, as we are gathered here today as religious leaders this morning and trying, to make some sense out of this tragedy, we have to be a little bit cautious with the words that we use because people could label us as being something anti-government or something like that. But we know the nation is suffering and we want the nation to know and the families of those persons to know that we as a religious community, at this point in time, we are standing with them. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much, Pundit. Well, Pastor Dutton, it's good to see you.
Thank you so much. I want to say that I share the views of all those who have spoken before me. I want to especially compliment Reverend Mansingh, who organized this meeting. This is the second time we are coming together, to make a difference in the society. You know what it did for me, Andy, and the rest of my religious colleagues? It's the Guardian article yesterday, front page. It said 3 bodies recovered. And then there was a picture. They say a picture is worth more than 1,000 words. And the the writing, the very small writing, said an unidentified family member locked in grief. An unidentified family member locked in grief. This is a very, very, very significant and hurtful and heartbreaking. You look at, I took notes of, on a television report yesterday, I took note of two statements. One is a guy, the father of one of the deceased, he said it's his third tragedy. The third tragedy. He couldn't even get up. He could hardly walk. He was walking like I was like a drunk person. That's how he was walking. And you could see the pain etched on his face, the brokenness, if you please. And there's a lot of brokenness in this society. In my mind, this brings us to the point whereby we can, have interfaith dialogue, whereby, as our dear friend said just now, we could just, the pundit, let the family know we are there for them. And sometimes I analyze that we are just so quick to be judgmental. We are just so quick, all right, to make statements that even cause more hurt. If I should just veer away from this for the time being, for a couple of seconds, when that Moses lady got killed in Westmoreland, I listened to a university professor, and I felt he was so insensitive. He went on to the issue of equity in the society, and that is why these things are happening. And I said, Lord have mercy. I mean, here you have a woman who tried to protect 2 children, was shot. I don't know. I doubt he knows her. But there was this quick rush to judgment. So we generally minimize the time we have to grieve and empathize with families. And the first thing what I really want to say today is let us empathize with these families. Let us, as Obama said when they had the mass shooting in America, we are praying for you. We are there for you. We are trying to feel your hurt. We could never exactly feel, but it must be a horrible feeling. And I'm saying, let us cry with them, let us share with them, let us respond to their needs. And this is the best time. Let us spend some time. Let us widen the space for empathy.
All right.
My opinion.
Thank you very much. Let's come back to you, Imam Imtiaz. What would you say to the people who have been gathering outside of the gates of the company over these last few days, sort of trying to whip up the well, I don't want to put a description on it, but at this point, you think enough has been said? The company has been sort of brought over the coals enough, and more time should be spent commiserating with the relatives, you think?
I do not think that enough has been said. When the accident happened, there was a long gap in informing the public. We had a lot of information on social media, and not enough has been said. In cases like this, I mean, I don't know the internal details of the company. I don't know. We do not know exactly what happened because no one has really explained to us what has happened or what they were doing. And I think after the death of these persons, we need to get a little more explanation so that there could be some closure in the matter. People just can't be waiting animals outside the compound waiting to hear some word. That is not how we do things in a civilized society. That's not how we do things in a civilized society. Look at what is happening in Europe. The whole of Europe is opening their hands to their arms and their hands to the refugees in Europe. Agreed is different from how they treat refugees from other parts of the world. But I suppose we have to treat our own people in the best possible way, even in times of tragedy. And I think that is where we fell short. So things like these may continue to happen because in big industries, you always have problems like this happening over the years, from time to time. In all different types of chemical and petrochemical plants, you have had accidents from time to time, but it's how we treat with it, how we treat with their families is what makes us human.
Right. And the we in this case, you're talking about the company, right? The company should do more. They should have been saying more. That's your point?
Yes, we should be saying more. Their PR was very bad. Their PR was very bad. And this seems to be a national problem, you know. The PR, we are not telling our public. We are keeping too many secrets from the public so that people do not know what is happening.
Right.
A simple case like what happened with electricity recently. We had to wait a long, long time to get any information from the electricity company. And that is, the uncertainty is what distresses us even more than the actual fact, the uncertainty. So we have to change our modus operandi, how we deal with the public, you know, because this is, first of all, this is a state company, a state-owned company, especially for the people of Marabella, because after the tragedy of the closure of Petrotrin, this is a greater tragedy with the loss of lives, and we have to be a little more sensitive.
Right. I think what the experts say is that there needs to be sort of a higher tier of what they call crisis communications management, and communications management. But Pastor Mansingh, I know one of your concerns was the threat that this matter could be too politicized, could be over politicized, and you lose the reason why people are gathering. That's one of your points, Pastor Mansingh.
Yes, and continue to build on what Imam said. There were too many gaps, and we want to ensure that the gaps that exist do not allow for the politicizing of this matter, or even for, while we do appreciate also the space and the necessity of the unions and others and so on, we want to maintain the dignity of the people. We want to ensure that the compassionate aspect of us as a nation is not covered over by the anger, because over the long term, if we hold on to the anger, it's going to be really detrimental to us. But we also need to, as religious leaders, we are not a political group, we are not a trade union movement, we are not a corporate group. As religious leaders, we are calling, and we need for the management and the leadership of PARI to understand that there were gaps that existed, that they need to address. The communication was very poor. And what is it saying to me? What we continue to see happening in our country, Mr. Andy, and to our viewers, is that there's a lack of trust by the general population and citizens in the leaders and those who are managing our agencies or governmental agencies, state agencies, etc. And when there is no trust, that's a crisis. That's a crisis in itself. And the operations and the behavior of the PARI leadership and management at this time leaves a lot to be desired. And when there is, in the absence of information and accurate information, speculation thrives, and you will have, a barrage of opinions, and most of which are incorrect. And so we are seeing that happening today. But Mr. Andy, I want to add, and as our faith leaders would have dialogued on this yesterday, there are many questions that need to be answered by the management of PARI. And I would have sent a list of them to you, Mr. Andy. And we trust that from the media perspective, you all would continue to be bastions for the nation and ask these questions. But one of the concerns, a major concern we have, is what was really taking place? What were they doing in that pipeline? We need a national explanation of this. And also, why was there crude oil still in the pipeline? Was the mothballing process of Petrotrin properly done, and was there further evaluation of the mothballing of Petrotrin after the initial implementation of the mothballing? And should we be afraid, Mr. Andy, that there can be more accidents taking place? I mean, sometime recently, last year, there was a fire. And we know that even though Petrotrin, now Paria, is not operational the way it used to be, that is still a time bomb, so to speak, for the community of Marabella.
All right,
So
I want to give
what is happening here? And when you have fatalities in an entity like this or in an industry like this, that is an indication to us that we can safely suggest that there would have been a series of smaller mishaps before that led to this.
Right.
It doesn't get this bad immediately, Mr. Andy. And so questions need to be asked about the management, about the processes utilized to get this job done. Were the safety requirements in place? Why did it take that long for there to be a response for safety? And questions like that.
All right, so I want to give
ask these questions as well.
Right, I want to give Pastor Doughton and come back to the pundit before we wrap up. We just have a couple of minutes left. So Pastor Doughton, so what would be your parting shot as we try to go forward in a different manner on this issue?
My final statement is that I looked at the people meter, and building on the platform set by the religious leaders here, a question was asked. Do you have hope and trust in the possibility of an investigation being independent? And do you think it will provide the results? I'm paraphrasing here. 35% said yes, and 65% said no. Now that tells you something, that people are losing trust. My perspective is that this perhaps could be the tipping point whereby we recover trust, we begin to recover trust. I hear from a lot of citizens on both sides of the political spectrum, and they're willing to move the country in a positive direction, a corruption-free direction. Clearly, I mean, I listened to one of the relatives of the victims, and she said a government minister came there, and he didn't relate to them in a way that brought hope and comfort and peace. And we have to come out from our ivory towers. People are losing trust, at a record-breaking pace. We have a chance, perhaps the last chance to get it right, the people to rebuild trust in our institutions. Let us go forward under God and rebuild that trust. It will take a long time.
I think you should read my column in the Express today about this question of trust and investigations.
Wow, I buy it every day, so I'll check.
Thank you very much. Pundit, you're gonna get the last word.
Yeah, well, as it stands now, Andy and our team here this morning, and to the nation as they look at us, and the nation is waiting to exhale. We are all holding our breath at this time. Many people are in confusion because they do not know how to turn, where to turn, what to look out for next, because we have been having tragedies after tragedies after tragedies in this nation. Not only this particular one where we find that that these 4 persons has died. How many fires we have been having, and people have been losing their lives. So something is amiss, and we in this grouping are hoping that, and even as a member of the Interreligious Organization of Trinidad and Tobago, I'm hoping that all of us as a nation could get together in prayer. Prayer should be the answer for us, because that is the only thing that can give us hope. If we come together and we pray. So at our next meeting in the Interreligious Organization later on this month, in a couple of weeks' time, I'll be bringing up this thought again that, the nation should get together and we should all be praying for our brothers and sisters. Each one of us should be our brother's keeper, and we should pray so that a tragedy like this and the other fires and other negative situations that are affecting the country would not repeat itself. I thank you very much.
All right. Well, thanks to all of you, gentlemen, Reverend Mansingh, Imam Imtiaz Ali, Pastor Clive Doughton, and Pundit Siju. Thank you very much. We're going to continue to stay on it and help in this process. We will take a break. When we come back, we share with you the numbers, COVID-19 in our midst today, and we go to our next discussion with Ms. Lisa McLean Trotman and Mr. Marlon Bascom on the issue of the need for greater protection for children in Trinidad and Tobago. Stay with us.
What's the best way to grab the attention of viewers?
Please exercise more patience. You have to be kidding me.
Doing what we do best.
I'll say at the very least it's a conspiracy of laziness against the people.
Join me, Keaton Shaw,
And me, Sean Michael Small, for Talking Point.
weekdays from 8 a.m. to 9:30 a.m.
We go in depth on the trending issues and engage the most controversial newsmakers.
as we get them to account to the people for their actions.
You can't go to the government with nothing. You can't go to cabinet with an empty hand, with a wish.
I'm glad that we're having this a sober, mature discussion.
In the present situation, I expect a continuation of the chaos.
Join us for the discussion, Mondays to Fridays,
Only on WASN.
the content capital.
Burning questions, urgent topics. Welcome back to One on One, the show where we tackle the most current and pertinent subjects that are affecting all citizens, where we ask the hard questions and have in-depth conversations. What separates One on One from other talk shows is that the conversation stems from a younger perspective on topics that affect the fabric of our society. One on One, Wednesdays at 10 a.m. on WESN Content Capital.
It may seem like the hardest thing to do right now, but we all need each other to wear a mask, wash our hands, watch our physical distance, and stay at home. We need you safe. Together we can make the difference. Together we can curb the spread of COVID-19. So let's be responsible in our actions.
The Trinidad and Tobago Red Cross Society. Mission-based, people-focused, community-driven.
Welcome back. Well, let's just take a quick look at the numbers for COVID-19 in our midst. The numbers that were put together at the end of the working day yesterday, the new positive cases, the totally recovered patients, the total active cases, the number of persons in hospital in Trinidad and Tobago. 102,736, that's the totally recovered patients. 21,777, the total active positive cases. The death toll at the end of the day yesterday, 3,632. 128,145, that's the total number of positive cases reported in the country since we began the counting on March 12, 2020. It's almost 2 years ago, almost to the day. 378 new positive cases reported in the 24 hours up to the end of yesterday, and 280, that's the total number of persons in hospital. And that number keeps going down every day, it seems, and that is one of the best signs we have as we track this thing. So there's no Newsday poll this morning, so that takes us then straight to our next discussion. It comes from an ad which was carried in the papers a couple of days ago. It says that there's a need to protect all children from violence. It says the Spotlight, it talks about the Spotlight initiative in Trinidad and Tobago. It says every child in Trinidad and Tobago has the right to live free from violence and exploitation, and it asks some questions. What is emotional abuse and what causes it? How it affects children and what you can do to prevent emotional abuse? Well, to help us in that discussion this morning, Ms. Lisa McLean-Trotman. She's I would say the specialist, something called the specialist for communications for development. She works at UNICEF for the Eastern Caribbean area. And Mr. Marlon Bascom, he's a manager at investigation and the intervention unit the North and East region of the Children's Authority. And it's a program, they say, that is sponsored by the EU. Good morning to both of you.
Good morning. Good morning. Thank you for having us.
Thank you very much. So let's start with you, Ms. McLean-Trotman. Let's talk a little bit about the program, what it aims to do, how it came about.
Okay, so the EU program, the Spotlight program, we started in Trinidad in 2017. And this program is not just in the Caribbean, but it's also in other parts of the world as well, where the EU, in collaboration with the UN, they launched an initiative that's aimed at ending gender-based violence, primarily against women and girls. But of course, we know in our region, we can't speak about gender-based violence without also speaking about boys, because boys are also affected by violence. So the two Spotlight community countries are Trinidad and Tobago and Grenada for the Caribbean. So what we're talking about today, or what you would have seen in the newspaper, is part of a broader interventions that we've been supporting in Trinidad and Tobago. Some of these interventions include training for, building the capacity of our civil society organizations. We've been working with schools, with teachers in terms of building their capacity to address gender-based violence. We have also would have worked with other government organizations, such as the Child Affairs Division in the Office of the Prime Minister, in terms of addressing gender-based violence. So we would have done this during COVID. We're also supporting Children's Authority. There are other areas such as working with legal reform. So it's looking at addressing gender-based violence in a holistic manner. So we look at the legal aspect, society, building, like I said, the capacity of CSOs, working with influencers. So it's very broad-based, and we hope at the end of the period that we really can report, even if not a decrease in violence, but that people have a greater awareness about gender-based violence and what they can do to prevent it, and also how to report on it as well. And I have to say that this is not, even though I'm here as UNICEF, but it is an EU-UN project. So all of the UN agencies in Trinidad and Tobago, that they are involved. So I'm here actually representing the UN, not necessarily UNICEF, because it's a EU-UN project.
Well, right. And UNICEF is an agency within the UN, right? That's what the UN and
Yes.
UNICEF stands for, right? Right. So, Mr. Bascom, let's get to you and from the perspective of the Children's Authority.
Well, we would definitely, we are very, very pleased about this partnership. We are very happy to work alongside UNICEF, the EU, the UN, because one of our main motivations is the fact that child protection is everybody's business, and we want everybody to be involved. In Trinidad and Tobago, unfortunately, we have a situation where between 4,000 to 5,000 cases are reported yearly to the Children's Authority. And the various types of abuse include sexual abuse, physical abuse, and neglect as the main ones that we see. And of course, the impact of COVID is such that we continue to see levels of harm, neglect, and abuse perpetuated against our children. So we are really happy to be a part of this partnership so that we could work towards the reduction of crime and violence towards our children in particular.
You said 4,000 to 5,000 reports you get a year of some kind of violence against children in Trinidad and Tobago alone?
Yes. Yes. So, for example, in 2021, it was 4,140 cases that we received reports for. In the previous year, 2020, it was over 5,000. It was 5,017. And that has been our consistent level of reporting since we began in May 2015 as an entity.
It prompts the question, what is an example of what qualifies as abuse that ordinary folks like myself don't probably recognize and acknowledge?
Well, one of the things that is sometimes difficult to recognize, especially in teenagers, is when someone is being under some form of sexual abuse or even sexual grooming. As you know, in our country, children, anyone under the age of 18, cannot consent to a sexual activity. And as such, sometimes you may see a 15-year-old girl or a 16-year-old boy who may already be in a sexual relationship with an adult, and persons around them may not have recognized that abuse is taking place, because that's what it is. It's abuse for a teenager who's 15, 16 to be in a sexual relationship with an adult who is 20-something, 30-something, 40-something. And sometimes persons also don't recognize the signs. So, for example, in younger children, if a child who is usually active and moving about suddenly becomes very quiet over a period of time, if the child doesn't want to engage with persons that they're usually familiar with, sometimes persons don't recognize these signs. Sometimes we don't speak to children in appropriate ways about their genitalia and different things like that. So when we use common substitute words like cookie and these kind of things, sometimes the child may be trying to tell us something and we may not immediately pick up on it. If your child says, this person touched my cookie, you may not, because it's a word that is used interchangeably, sometimes persons may not pick up on the abuse. So unfortunately, there are several instances where we see where the persons around the child may not have known that abuse was taking place for some time. And of course, once you do become aware of it, we do encourage persons to make sure to report.
All right, let's just come back to you, Ms. McLean-Trotman. So what are some of the ways in which the UN agencies try to address these issues? What do you point out where there may be lapses in understanding and how you'll go about doing it?
Well, first of all, I have to say that we try to be very evidence-informed, or shall I say evidence-based, before we support any type of interventions. And one of the reasons that we would have been working with the Children's Authority in addressing these issues is because last year we would have done a social norms study, trying to understand what are those norms that guide violence against children in Trinidad and Tobago. And some of the results were interesting. Some of them were not surprising. For example, we would have noted that in the study that persons tended to sometimes turn a blind eye when it came to abuse of boys. Sometimes they thought that maybe boys, for example, that because they're stronger and tougher, that they can maintain emotional violence much better. People tend to turn a blind eye again, some of the reasons that it's not my business. And we realized that, and of course, the religious factor in some cases would have come out, such as spirit aroused by the child in terms of physical violence and so on. But having said that, one of the things then that we would seek to do is to try to create awareness among the population in Trinidad and Tobago about what are some of those actions that constitute child sexual abuse, constitute physical abuse, constitute emotional abuse, because we know that sometimes it may be colored by culture in terms of, in our culture, we've had this for a long time, so it's not considered emotional abuse, or it's not considered physical abuse, or even sexual abuse. So that's one of the first areas in which the UN has been working in terms of creating an awareness about what is gender-based violence, what is violence against children, within the context of gender-based violence, and looking then at both boys and girls. As I also said before, we've been trying to build the capacity of CSOs because they're at the community level, and to help them to better respond when they see incidences of violence within the communities, and so on, working with schools, working with, as I said, influencers, the legal aspects, some of the UN agencies have been addressing. So it's a wide range of approach in terms of interventions, but the most important thing for us is for the ordinary person to be able to recognize these are the signs and the symptoms of different forms of abuse. This is what it constitutes. But not only that, this is how we can respond differently. So you would have noticed in the campaign that we're doing on the in the newspaper and also in the ads, we don't only tell people about what it is, but also what is it that you can do differently. So I think that's also value add in terms of helping to address the problem that would have been earlier identified.
How much, to what extent attention is paid to, and emphasis is put on situations in which people in a community are encouraged either to interact with those parents and those families where they see violence of one kind or another taking place, and because a lot of times people say they want to stay out of other people's business, and it's difficult to get involved in a situation where you think stuff is happening there, or you hear and you see in ways in which parents deal with their children, and you think that is not appropriate, but you don't want to get involved in it. What is there to encourage more awareness?
Yes, so that's really one of the big focus of the Social Norms campaign, changing norms around parenting, changing norms around interacting, and changing norms around reporting. As would have been said earlier by Mr. Bascom, we have been working for a long while to get across the whole notion that child protection is everybody's business. It's not just the business of the parents, but if you see something, to say something. And we're, like I said, while this program is new, we would have been building on what we would have started several years ago in Trinidad and Tobago, to Break the Silence campaign, where that was an intervention. We were trying to get people to break the silence about child abuse, not to keep quiet about it, but to speak out, to report it, and the Children's Authority, to the police. So again, trying to change norms around our practices as far as interaction with children, interaction with women and boys and girls, but also changing practices and changing the norms around reporting. That whole notion that that is not my business does not stand anymore, but it is everybody's business, and we all have a duty and a responsibility to report.
All right, Mr.
Or to say something. Yes.
Mr. Bascom?
Sorry, I really want to emphasize that with respect to the aspect of reporting. So one of the things that we encourage the public to recognize is that even if they're afraid of being involved or they don't want to be fully hands-on, they can also report anonymously. So they can contact the Children's Authority at 996 or 800-2014 and report anonymously. Just give us all the information so that we could go out and investigate and also work with the police where necessary to get the right information to make sure that a child is not in danger or children are not in danger. And so we really wanted to focus on that as well, because in some instances, it may be because of fear. And as Ms. Strothman is saying, there were previous social norms where either persons may not have recognized that abuse was taking place, or the norm was to just not get involved. But we really want to emphasize for persons to report if they see something, to say something. And as we have been saying, child protection definitely is everyone's business.
All right, and let's come back to close it out with you, Ms. McLean-Trotman. You mentioned earlier about efforts at legal reform. Can you just, in 30 seconds or so, just give us a little more specificity about that, specificity?
Sure. So some of the UN agencies, I know UNICEF is one of them, have been working in terms of ensuring that these systems are in place and the legal framework, it is strengthened so that you can have a better response to child protection. And like I said, to make certain that we have systems in place where it's easier for persons to report. It's easier for persons to be, not necessarily, I don't want to use the word convicted, but that, for those instances to be addressed from a legal perspective that is less threatening to a child. In some jurisdictions, we have cases where it drags out for a long time. How do you speed up those type of cases so that it's not as traumatic as it can be for children and their families who are involved? So those are some of the areas that we have been examining in terms of how do we strengthen the legal framework so that at the end of the day, like I said, children and their families, they come through this not as traumatized as they could have been, because being involved in a legal process could be very traumatizing.
All right, well, thank you both very much. Ms. Lisa McLean-Trotman, a specialist in communication for development, I like that term, with UNICEF's East Caribbean region, and Mr. Marlon Bascom, acting manager for investigation and intervention at North and East District of the Children's Authority in Trinidad and Tobago. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
All right, so let's move to begin our look around the region. Now we go to Jamaica, where the governor, the bank there, was making some points about exchange rate and its effect on what is called the slower pace of depreciation and what occurred in the same period last year. Let's take a look at that.
The Bank of Jamaica, BOJ, reported that the foreign exchange rate depreciation has slowed significantly as of February 16, 2022. In a digital quarterly media briefing, BOJ's governor, Richard Bowles, says this reflects actions taken by the bank in response to the higher than targeted inflation rate ranging between 4 and 6%.
As of the 16th of February 2022, the exchange rate was 157.42 to $1, represented an annual point-to-point depreciation of 4%. This is a slower pace of depreciation than what occurred over the same period of last year. Moreover, since the beginning of 2022, the exchange rate has depreciated by 1.5%, significantly slower than the 6.1% for the similar period in 2021.
Mr. Bowles also reported that up to February 3, 2022, daily purchases of US dollar by authorized dealers and cambios saw a 12% growth when compared to the previous year.
The bank's actions have ensured that foreign currency flows continue to be healthy and that businesses and individuals in Jamaica who require foreign exchange have been able to access it. For the calendar year to the 3rd of February 2022, the daily purchases of US dollars by authorized dealers and cambios averaged approximately 37.2 million, 12% higher than the average of 33.3 million recorded over the same period last year.
Mr. Bowles stated that Jamaica's gross international reserves was adequately equivalent to 140% at a total of $4.3 billion US dollars. In foreign exchange trading for Friday, February 25, the US dollar sold for an average $155.86. The Canadian dollar ended trading at $122.47. The pound sterling traded for $211.99, and the euro sold for an average of $175.14.
All right, well, that's Jamaica. Let's go to Antigua now, where from ABS News, we're getting reports of the authorities there talking about a growth in GDP.
The government has again pointed to real gross domestic product growth of 5.3% in 2021 as evidence of resilience in the face of the COVID-19 pandemic.
That's right, Terry. It was discussed as Leader of Government Business in Parliament's Upper House, Senator Mary Claire Hurst, commenced debate on the Appropriations Bill 2022 today. Here's more. The 5.3% expansion in the economy in 2021, following the contraction by over 20% in 2020, was welcomed by Senator Mary Claire Hurst, the Leader of Government Business in the Upper House.
In this COVID situation, we were able to have an economic growth of 5.3%.
Senator Hurst responded to opposition concerns during the budget debate in the lower house as Honorable Trevor Walker had questioned the figures.
To expect that a Prime Minister would stand here and tell the nation that we did grow by 5.3% based on what he got from an official organization, and shamelessly somebody would stand on the other side and say that that is not true. But, Madam President, that is what they're about, rhetoric.
Senator Hurst insisted the government has managed the country's fiscal affairs well during challenging times.
When I look around Antigua and I see the construction that's going on, when I talk to people and they say to me, there's no aggregates in the island, I work at the Antigua and Barbuda Port Authority, and I see the barge that comes into this country, Madam President. Something is going on, Madam President, and we need to honestly, Madam President, be truthful. Madam President, the projection is 8%. That's the projection. and we still have the pandemic. It's existing.
Garfield Burford, ABS News.
And we head up to the top of the hour. We'll take a look at what's happening in Guyana, which is, well, next door, as it will.
President Irfan Ali has called on citizens to change their attitudes to ensure the success of the country. In his address at the national flag-raising ceremony, the president focused on his concept of the things that are needed to forge one Guyana. He said Guyanese should no longer sit back as progress unfolds before their eyes.
It is we, as a people, who must change our attitude, culture, and values towards the environment, society, and towards each other. That will ultimately determine our collective success as one Guyana. This is not the time in our history to sit back and watch the journey unfold. This is our time to embrace the train of progress. This is our time to embrace the demand our country make of us. This is our time to be positive. This is our time to remove negativity. This is our time to advance the future of our one Guyana.
In the address to the nation, the president also called on citizens to be realistic in their expectations. He said the country's continued experiences with COVID, the recent floods, and supply chain issues are fresh examples of how expectations must be tamed against realities. According to the president, in being realistic, the country must be humble to accept help in areas where help may be required.
In being realistic, we must be humble to accept help in areas where we require help. Being realistic is being humble enough to say I do not know and reach for answers where they do exist. It is for this reason our local content legislation was developed with a realistic understanding of where we are as a country. Being realistic is also understanding that the commitments we made in the manifesto are to be achieved within 5 years, not 1 year and 2 years, within 5 years. And I assure every Guyanese, those commitments we made will be honored and delivered.
President Ali also said his government will remain committed to its push towards building a one Guyana.
All right, on the other side of this, we will be talking with the Minister for Youth Development and National Services, Minister Foster Cummings, about a range of programs organized to lift the condition with young people in Trinidad and Tobago. We talk with him about that on the other side, but up ahead, news at 7 o'clock. Stay with us. This is AM Prime on this Wednesday morning.
Seven is out. All day is in. WESN News on the hour.
Every day, we communicate through stories. Stories of ourselves, our challenges, our goals, our experiences, and our aspirations. Storytelling is an art that we have mastered. WESN Film Studios comprises a collaborative team of experts with extensive industry experience locally, regionally, and internationally. The ability of your business to successfully communicate with your preferred audience depends on the strength of the stories you tell. Your vision should be communicated in a high-quality, professional, and creative way. From concept to post-production, advertising to film, multi-camera productions, live events, streaming and virtual conferencing. We are WESN Film Studio. Let your own unique voice be heard and your vision realized. Call us today at 628-5835 for your next production.
In this season, we talk more about health, wellness, and everything in between. I am so excited to share with you everything about health and wellness so that you can design the life that you've always dreamed of. Join me here on What's Up Doc.
What's Up Doc? Tuesdays and Thursdays here on WESN, Content Capital.
Let your voice be heard. Call Madam Fix-It on WESN, the only place that effectively helps you with your woes. Having problems getting onto government agencies, water woes, NIS and pension problems, potholes, and much, much more. Call me, Madam Fix-It, every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, right here on WESN. Let me fix it for you.
The issue, the continued rise in the price of flour and its impact on the cost of living in Trinidad and Tobago. How should we go about it? I want to ask you, what has been revealed to you about the state of vulnerability in the country because of this exercise and because of what we're going through? Is the government losing the war on the vaccine front?
The discussion should revolve around the common good for the greatest number of people in Trinidad and Tobago.
How do we inculcate a sense of respect and regard for people who may not be of your own political ilk or persuasion?
The communities are now being used by political opportunists. So
when the tables are turned, it's the same way. Okay, this has been 10 Questions. I'm Andy Johnson, and we'll see you next time.
A reminder from WESN. We urge you to protect yourself and others from the spread of COVID-19. Stay safe by taking some simple precautions. Clean your hands often. Use soap and water or an alcohol-based hand rub. Maintain a safe distance from anyone who is coughing or sneezing. Wear a mask. Don't touch your eyes, nose or mouth. Cover your nose and mouth with your bent elbow or a tissue when you cough or sneeze. Stay at home. If you have a fever, cough and difficulty breathing, seek medical attention. Following the above can help us all to help each other.
Welcome back to the program. With us now, he's the Member of Parliament for Lahore Talparo. He's the Minister for Youth Development and National Service, Mr. Foster Cummings. He's been doing some work in recent weeks, dealing with initiating programs for young people in different parts of the country, agricultural homestead programs, national service programs, reviving the youth camps across the country. We're talking with him about just that this morning. Good to have you. Yes, your mic is still off.
Hear me?
Yes, good now.
Yes. Very good morning, and I'm very pleased to be here, Andy, and to all your listeners. It's a very pleasant, good Wednesday morning. Happy to be here to share information relating to our youth development programs with you and with the national community.
All right, can we start with the issue about to what extent we can call it the revival of the reinvigoration, the reintroduction of youth camps in the country, and the importance of that to what we're trying to get at with youth development?
Yeah, I am having a bit of difficulty with the audio, but if you hear me clearly, I did not get the last statement you made.
Yeah, the efforts at reviving the concept and the existence of youth camps in the country, and how that fits into the program of youth development and national service?
Well, the youth camps, as we commonly would know in terms of what they were called before, they're now Youth Apprenticeship and Development Centers.
Right.
These facilities catered for young people between the ages of 15 to 19. We have now revised that to 15 to 25. And we expect that this sort of residential learning will cater to vulnerable youth who require that type of support and who are, of course, desirous to engage in technical and vocational learning in that environment. And so we intend to revive these facilities to accommodate at each facility at least 250 participants. And we expect that this will, of course, drive the available skills in our workforce, as well as serve as a feeder for young people interested in entrepreneurship. I can tell you that we will revive the Presto Presto Youth Facility. We will as well revive the Chatham Youth Facility. The government intends to repurpose the Chaguaramas Convention Center as a youth development and apprenticeship center. And we will construct a new facility at Wallerfield. All those facilities I mentioned before are for youths 15 to 25 and cater for young men. We will as well reopen the El Dorado Youth Facility for young women, and we are currently in discussions with the Tobago House of Assembly to reopen the facility at Mount St. George in Tobago.
Right, so that's going back to what it used to be in the beginning. Talk a little bit about how the administration came to the conclusion that these things were necessary to go back there, because for years there'd been discussion one way or the other as to whether or not we want to go back there and why we shouldn't or why we should. What did it take for this your administration now, the current administration, to decide, well, this is the way we want to go and we want to return to those ambitions?
Well, you recall that the Prime Minister sometime appointed the Community Recovery Committee, which was headed by Mr. Watkins, and that committee engaged in several consultations, particularly with persons in East Port-of-Spain. They held several meetings and almost about 53 communities were affected by these discussions. And one of the recommendations coming out of that Community Recovery Committee is the resuscitation of the so-called youth camps. We have as well had several requests from our youth officers based at the several districts throughout Trinidad and Tobago, of persons, of course, seeking this type of intervention by the government. And based on those representations and based on the report of the Community Recovery Committee, the government has taken a decision to reintroduce these facilities. And I can tell you that already following the announcement that we have been having several calls and communications from members of the public in relation to the youth camp facilities.
Yeah, and the age range has been taken up a bit. What explains that? Instead of, we said 16 to... Yeah.
Of a technical difficulty in me hearing you. Could you just repeat that?
Yeah.
I just lost that.
Right, I was asking about the decision to raise the sort of outside age to which people become eligible, and the program caters for, yeah.
Well, you would imagine that when these camps were introduced, I would assume at that time that the technocrats would have come to the conclusion that the cutoff age should be 19. The cabinet appointed a committee headed by Mr. Anthony Garcia, former Minister of Education, to review the curriculum and management model for these facilities. That committee will submit its report next week, but have, of course, been submitting preliminary reports. And based on those preliminary reports, the committee has suggested that we increase the age to 25. Now, I understand from their reports that we may have different facilities catering for a different age group, so that you may have one facility catering from 15 to X age, and then another facility catering for the older cohort. So the report is not finalized as yet. I expect to receive it next week on behalf of the cabinet, and we'll be able to give you more information at that point in time.
Right, and so there's what you've announced there is a kind of expansion of the program, because to the best of my memory, so you had a youth camp in Presto Presto, you had one in Chatham, and you had one in Tobago. Now you talked about setting up a facility in El Dorado. Well, of course, and then the girls' camp, as it were, was in El Dorado. So you're going to revive that, and you talk about one in Wallerfield.
The only new facility really will be the one in Wallerfield, and that is to cater for the persons in East Trinidad. Prior to this revamping of these facilities, there was a facility in Chaguaramas. We will not be utilizing the same site, because I think that now is in the hands of the military. And we therefore have a facility at the Chaguaramas Convention Center that we can utilize. We have decided to utilize that location instead of the Chaguaramas, that will cater for the young people in West Trinidad. Before that, in addition to Presto Presto and Chatham, the El Dorado Girls Camp, which existed there for many years, serving the young ladies, that will be reopened. And the one in Tobago at Mount St. George was also an existing camp. So that what we are doing is reopening the camps at the locations they existed before, and reintroducing, and we are now introducing a new facility in Wallerfield to cater for East Trinidad.
Yeah. I want to come to the homestead, the agricultural homestead arrangement a bit, but to ask, what did the Watkins Committee say as to why these things are important to address the matters that they were addressing? Because the matters they were addressing arose out of action or activity that was taken by young people in parts of Port of Spain and environs as a direct relation to the killings of the three young men in Morvant. So I want to ask you to make the connection there. But before we go there, in my discussions with the Member of Parliament for La Brea some weeks ago, he was talking about engaging young people in different ways in his community. You talked about setting up some facilities in conjunction with some of the companies in that area. To what extent that informs some of what you're doing on this wider scale?
Okay, let me just start with you mentioned La Brea.
Yes.
And what I can tell you is that I have been working very closely with the Member of Parliament for La Brea. And the reason, of course, is that following the restructuring of Petrotrin, we thought that we would make sure that we introduce training programs in those fence line communities, La Brea, Pointe-a-Pierre, Point Forte, Faizabad, Palo Seco, Siparia, and all of those areas. We have been having interactions with the representatives in those areas to make sure that we introduce relevant programs of training for the young people who, prior to the restructuring, may have seen Petrotrin as the place that they would have as first preference for employment. So that we will be introducing several training programs in those communities. I can tell you that the government has decided to utilize the beach camp facility, a former Petrotrin facility, as a national service complex. And at that complex, we'll be offering a wide range of services there. An advisory committee has been set up by the government to advise on the voluntary national service program. And that committee will submit its report in April as we seek to put in place a program that would be purpose-built and relevant to our young people. contributing, of course, to their sustainable development, and of course, introducing to them the question of life skills and so forth. So that is what we're doing in that area of the country. In terms of the other areas, you would know that we have been very much involved in East Port of Spain, and that we are also in discussions with representatives in those areas. I visited Morba quite recently, and the young people there, of course, are very excited about developments that we are pursuing, and in particular, the Youth Agricultural Homestead program that you mentioned. We have a lot of young people demonstrating an interest in agriculture, and as a result, the government has decided to introduce this program. We launched it yesterday. It's called YAP, and that program is designed for young people who are interested in agriculture. We will, of course, take idle state lands, develop them, put the infrastructure in. It's a 2-year training program. The first year will be conducted by UTT through their agricultural training facility. And the second year is a practical component on the lands itself. And therefore, we will train the young farmers before we actually give them access to the land. That program, of course, the application opened yesterday. And we will be able to evaluate those applicants and select from the applicants 150 young persons who will take part in that program.
So, okay, on the issue of the report of the Watkins Committee, what was it? What's the rationale for this? Perhaps the suggestion that this is the way to go to address the issue of what I call youth alienation and disenchantment in different parts of the country, and particularly in these urban areas, such as the areas around Port of Spain?
All right, so I'm hearing you in and out, but I think you mentioned the Community Recovery Committee.
Yes.
And the work of that committee.
Yes.
And what may have prompted the work of that committee.
No, what's the connection made between what the recommendations that they made, which led to the sort of the ramping up and the revving up of the proposals to reestablish youth camps? Why is that seen as the remedy for addressing the problem of youth unemployment, youth alienation, and disenchantment in different parts of the country?
There is a category of young persons that feel sort of disconnected from what is taking place in society, and in particular, a category that we refer to as NEET, which is young person neither employed or involved in any sort of formal training. So that category of young persons might be the persons that you meet when you go into communities and you interact. They are not employed, they're not involved in any sort of educational training programs. And therefore, whilst the programs will be open to all young people, even those who may have come out of the secondary school system with their full certificate, who may now want to equip themselves with a skill, we will be paying particular attention to that group that we refer to as NEET. And the report of the committee suggests that getting that group involved in these training programs and giving them the support, of course, will help them in their own development, and as well, of course, provide the additional skills for our workforce that we require. And we will as well be pursuing entrepreneurship for these young persons who may want to get involved in business, because at the end of the day, we want to, have job creators as opposed to job seekers.
Yeah, and the idea then is that if they are so, I was going to use the term gainfully occupied, or at least purposefully occupied, they won't be seen as a sort of fodder for the people who presumably who pull their strings and get them to do other things that are deleterious to the development of the society, correct?
Yes, you know that we grew up hearing the saying idle hands, the devil's workshop, I think is how it went.
Yeah, the devil,
and therefore we think that
the devil finds work for idle hands, yes.
Are you hearing me?
Yes, the devil finds work for idle hands.
So if we get these young people, trained up and equipped to contribute to society in a sustainable way, then we expect to have a reduction in the number of persons available to the group that would prefer to operate outside of the law. So many of those young persons who are now, not making full use of their time in a productive manner, we expect to target some of them as participants for these programs.
All right, I know the agriculture homestead programs, that's a little bit closer to your heart in a sense, because some of it is happening in your very constituency, in parts of your very constituency. Let's talk a little bit about those, what the details are about how they are intended to work, and what would be sort of the outcomes of them, these agricultural homestead projects.
For instance, in my own constituency, we have a large sort of a rural area of the constituency, heavily involved in agriculture: Talparo, Mamoral, Monte Nuevo, Brazil, San Rafael, Mamoral. And on the other hand, we have the urban area of the constituency of La Joqueta. In both instances, because you would have observed that I run a very regular program for farmers. Wallafield is a large farming community in my own constituency, and therefore I have a passion for agriculture and encouraging young people to get involved in agriculture, because we need to now introduce new and younger farmers into the farming, into the agricultural sector. We have had a high interest demonstrated, and we expect to have a large number of persons applying for this program. And the good thing about this program is it also provides housing, because in addition to providing the land, the government will construct a starter home on each of these parcels and provide a startup grant following the training for these young 21st century agro-entrepreneurs. So it is one of the programs that we think will make a significant impact on our young people, and we expect to have a very high uptake for that program.
Yeah, so there's more than one of these initiatives in that community, right?
I lost you there.
There's more than one of these initiatives in that area, the agriculture homestead projects.
In my constituency?
Yeah, in that area.
There is one program targeted for the area of Talparo.
Yes.
In terms of in that area. And then we have one in Sangre Grande. But the first homestead program that we will be introducing, we will turn the sun on that in a few weeks, will be at the former Chatham Dairy Farm in Point Fortin. That will be the pilot project in terms of the first site that has an acreage of over 400 acres. And we expect that our first cohort will be able to benefit from that development. But at the same time, the Ministry of Agriculture, which we are working very closely with, have already engaged the Rural Development Company to develop a site at Chambers Trace in Talparo that will accommodate some of our young persons in East Trinidad who are interested in the homestead program.
Right, I think the giveaway term you use there in terms of Chatham is it's a dairy farm. So dairy farming is going to be what would be the major activity there in Chatham, correct?
Well, it's a former dairy farm that we're now going to develop mainly to persons interested in doing crops. There is a coordinating committee for this homestead program, and they will, of course, advise the government on some of the programs that we will actually implement on site. So whether we will have, that is to say, whether we will have livestock as well as crops, that of course we will develop as we go along. But I'm certain at this point in time that we will be certainly accommodating those persons who want to go into short crops. And of course, we will be introducing modern techniques in farming, working along with the Ministry of Digitization and we will be introducing as well the aquaponics and hydroponics and all of these modern techniques.
Yeah, and in a couple of minutes we have left, let's talk a little bit about what is intended for the revival of the girls' camp.
Could you just repeat that for me, please, Andy?
What is intended for the revival of the girls' camp?
The girls' camp, as I said, we received Mr. Garcia's report next week, but I know traditionally the girls' camp did focus a lot on culinary skills, and I don't want to preempt what the Garcia committee will present to the cabinet, but I'm certain that it will involve some level of what took place there before, and we await to see what the report will propose to the government, and based on that, the cabinet will make a decision.
All right, so it's a lot of work and work in progress on a large scale, on a big scale, you would say, Minister Cummings.
Yes, the government is not prepared. The fact that the Prime Minister established this Ministry of Youth Development and National Service is because the government intends to pay a lot of focus on the development of our young people. We are working hand in hand with the Ministry of Education. We're working hand in hand with the Ministry of Agriculture, the Ministry of Social Development, the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development, the Ministry of Digitization. So that it's a whole of government approach. But this new ministry, of course, was established to focus on the development of our young people in a very meaningful way. And we are demonstrating that it's not lip service. And we are making sure that we put things in place that our young people will be able to access the relevant training that they require, all the way up to establishing their own businesses. The government would have announced in the budget that we will be establishing youth business parks and youth business hubs, where we will allow our young people who are interested in getting involved in business all the facilities that they require to turn their ideas into reality and, of course, become young and successful entrepreneurs and job creators.
All right, the Minister for Youth Development and National Service, the Member of Parliament for Lahoketa Talparo, the Honorable Foster Cummings. Thank you very much.
It was a pleasure, Andy, and I'm always willing to share the information with the national community. We can, of course, certainly have future discussions. I thank you very much for the invitation, and do have a very pleasant day. Stay safe, and all of Trinidad and Tobago, please stay safe. Stay safe and have a beautiful Wednesday. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We will continue these discussions as we go along. We want to, just before we leave you, we ask you to watch this. This is Marshall Montano at that famous Indian festival, Mahashivaratri, the Hindu festival celebrating each year the reverence of Hindus' Lord Shiva. Let's take a look.
Let's go! 2, 3, 4! Jump, jump, jump up! Mahashivaratri! Ah, yeah! Oh, yeah! Oh, yeah! Everybody, let me see you now dance! Get ready now, dance! Oh! Let's jump, let's jump! 1, 2, 3, 4! Come on, come on. Listen! Come on, Sadhguru! When I say dance with you, say dance with you, Sadhguru, dance! Dance! 1, 2, I just wanna dance with you. Sadhguru, let me dance, dance with you. Hey, Satse, go Sadhguru, go Sadhguru. I love you. Come on, come on, come on.
That's Marshall Montano in India. Well, that's our broadcast for this morning. We thank you for watching. We tell you you can keep in touch with us here at AM Prime. You can send your emails to at WESNCC on all the social media platforms. News at the top of the hour, following which today's edition of Talking Point with Shah and Smallwood. For now, I'm Andy Johnson. That's it for this morning. Thanks for watching. We see you tomorrow.